The story opens in a whiteout, wind whispering across prairie, snow packed in drifts taller than fence posts. The rancher, Caleb Mercer, rides to check fences and finds an overturned but intact bobsled and tracks leading to his barn. Inside the barn, curled behind bales of hay, is a woman in ragged furs, hands trembling so hard she can barely hold a pistol. When Caleb approaches, low, slow hands visible, she screams the line, "Don't come closer and I'll kill you." It's a chilling threat, but not the challenge of aggression. It's the frightened command of someone who will do anything to stay anonymous. From the start, the dynamic is a study in suspicion and loneliness. Caleb is mid-40s, widowed years earlier after a fire on the ranch. He is practical and taciturn but haunted by a secret, the negligence that may have cost lives. The woman who gives the name Evelyn Shaw and claims to be a traveling seamstress is evasive. She has a pale scar on her wrist and carries a small leather box she refuses to open. She's terrified of being taken into town. Why? The sheriff's badge outside the local bar suggests law and order. But Evelyn's fear points elsewhere, something more ideological than criminal. Snow traps them together. The roads become impassable. Provisions dwindle. Through enforced proximity, they study one another. The wary parry and guard of survival. Caleb wants to call the marshal. Evelyn will not let him. She alternates between brittle humor and catatonic silence. They share meals in long pauses of small talk. The barn's light is the only warmth. Caleb's first crack in armor is a story told at the stove. His wife died in a barn fire caused by a careless lantern. He's never forgiven himself. Evelyn's pain is different. Flashes of an organized group, men in dark coats and silver pins, searching for a girl who spoke out at a meeting. A broken carriage. A child left behind. She mentions the Union of Purity once and then stops, seeing Caleb's confusion. He thinks it's a religious revival group. She corrects him. They are not only religious, they're political, and they enforce a brutal cleansing. Caleb's moral conflict deepens when he recognizes a name in her refuse, a name that links backward to the fire that killed his wife. The leather box in Evelyn's possession contains a ledger of names and small notations, implicating not only external villains, but people Caleb once trusted. Evelyn reveals she escaped after witnessing the Union commit arson as a show of intimidation. The ledger is proof she swore to protect. She fears the ledger falls into the hands of the same men who will burn, kill, and erase anyone who undermines them. Her fear of being identified stems from the Union's reach into law and commerce. That's why she's ready to shoot the moment anyone approaches. Anonymity is survival. As snow continues, their bond grows complicated. Caleb has to decide whether to shelter this woman who could expose his acquaintances, or to send her away and let the Union silence her. The marshal's arrival in the next town is delayed by weather, a plot device that amplifies tension. They must manage the ledger, hide clues, and decide whom to trust. A loyal ranch hand, Jonah, arrives from town with news. The Union is mobilizing a search party. The stakes escalate. In a tense midpoint, Caleb is forced to confront his own cowardice, how in the past his hesitation let others die. He refuses to repeat that inaction. Evelyn's arc is a hardening and then slow thaw. She moves from purely survivalist to an agent of resistance. She teaches Caleb to think beyond his farm. The ledger names innocent families promised protection but stripped of property. Caleb organizes a small band of neighbors, a few other ranchers, a young teacher outraged at censorship, to smuggle Evelyn and the ledger to a safe town. They train through blizzards. Evelyn shows a surprising knowledge of logistics, hiding spaces, and the ways the Union manipulates records. Their alliance shades into intimacy, built on mutual confession and shared resolve. Conflict peaks when the Union's emissaries appear, posing as trappers needing shelter. Caleb denies them entry. Suspicion simmers. A night raid attempts to plant evidence to flush Evelyn out. The ranch is attacked not with wide assault but with psychological warfare. A hurtful letter slipped beneath Caleb's door alleging his complicity in the fire, or leaving a burned ribbon of the kind worn by his late wife, provoking Caleb's worst fears. He fights not only the Union but his past self. The climax is a confrontation where Caleb must choose between turning Evelyn into, bayonet his safety, or standing with her to expose the Union. The ledger is smuggled out in a daring sleigh run across thin ice. Jonah distracts pursuers. Caleb and Evelyn are cornered at the ice. A skirmish becomes a test of moral courage. Caleb sacrifices safety and reputation to save Evelyn. In doing so, he risks the return of the very shame he's tried to bury. The resolution is bittersweet redemption. The ledger reaches a sympathetic editor in a distant town. The Union's actions are exposed after a campaign. Evelyn disappears to begin anew, perhaps heading to a city where her voice will be louder. Caleb stays to rebuild, taking up the mantle of guardian for families affected by the Union's violence. Their romantic thread ends as a quiet promise. They saved one another, but their futures lie separate, both cleansed by confession and strengthened by shared survival. The story closes on the barn door opening into brilliant, cold sunlight. The winter lifted, their secrets thawed. Themes, guilt and redemption, the cost of anonymity versus truth, moral courage taking the place of safety. The snowbound setting intensifies isolation and forces introspection. The threat, "I'll kill you," becomes a symbol of the instinct to protect a hard-won truth at any cost. The story begins in a brutal blizzard sweeping across the Wyoming plains in the late 1880s. The wind howls through pine breaks, pushing snow in heavy sheets that swallow fences and erase trails. Inside the storm rides Daniel Reeves, a respected rancher known for his quiet demeanor and generous heart. The townsfolk of Silver Creek call him the man who came from nowhere, because 10 years ago, he'd simply appeared with a small fortune, bought land, and built the Half Moon Ranch he's beloved, trusted, and utterly mysterious. One evening, while checking his herds against the snowdrift, Daniel notices a flicker of movement near his barn, a shadow stumbling through the storm. When he approaches, a ragged woman collapses at his feet, clutching a rusted revolver. Her eyes are wild with terror, her skin ghost pale from the cold. Before he can speak, she jerks the gun up, voice cracking, "Don't come closer, I'll kill you." The moment hangs heavy between them. Daniel stops mid-stride. He sees not a threat but a woman on the edge of collapse, her coat torn, her lips bleeding from frostbite. The revolver trembles. He raises his hands, voice low, gentle. "Easy now. Nobody's gonna hurt you." The woman's reply is a sob. "You already did." That one line turns the snow colder. Act 1. The woman who knew. Too much, Daniel coaxes her into the house, laying his gun aside, lighting the fire. She refuses food, watches him like a cornered fox. Her name, she says, is Clara Benton, and she's been running for days. She claims she escaped from a compound south of the border, a cult calling itself the Redeemed Fold. They'd held her for years, forcing her to work, punishing anyone who tried to flee. She saw things no human should, and when she finally broke free, she came north hunting one man. That man, she insists, is Daniel Reeves. He laughs in disbelief. "Ma'am, you've mistaken me for someone else." But her eyes burn with certainty. She tells him that years ago in the Fold's camp, their overseer was called Brother Nathaniel, a brutal man with a scar along his jaw, the same scar Daniel bears. She remembers his voice, his hands, his cruelty. Daniel denies it. He has no memory of her, no memory of a cult, no idea who Brother Nathaniel is. But Clara's shaking hands and terror seem genuine. When she pulls a faded photograph from her coat, one showing Daniel, younger, bearded, standing beside a wagon labeled the Redeemed Fold, his denial begins to fracture. He sits stunned, staring at the photo. The scar matches, the stance, the eyes, everything. And yet, his first memory is waking 10 years ago in a mining camp with no recollection of who he'd been before. A drifter found him half dead after a rock slide. He'd taken the name Daniel Reeves from a tag stitched in the lining of his coat. The name might have been his or someone else's. He never knew. Now the past he buried has walked into his home. Act 2. Doubt, discovery, and dangerous truths. The next days unfold with rising tension. The snow seals them in, no roads open, no telegraph lines. Daniel and Clara are trapped together in a blizzard of secrets. She won't sleep near him. He can't look at her without guilt he doesn't understand. At night, strange flashes disturb his dreams. The sound of a hymn sung in a low chant, a woman's scream, the smell of kerosene. Each dream feels less like imagination and more like memory. In the daylight, Daniel begins searching his own house for clues. He finds a trunk in the attic sealed tight. Inside are fragments, letters, a silver cross marked the Redeemed Fold, and a Bible with Brother Nathaniel inscribed in looping hand. His hands shake as he reads words written in his own handwriting. Forgiveness is a weapon sharper than fear. He brings the trunk to Clara. She trembles at the sight of it. That Bible, she says, belonged to the man who condemned her to the mines for trying to flee. He used scripture to justify punishment. But then, near the end, she recalls that same man freeing her from a beating, whispering for her to run. She thought it was pity. Now she doesn't know. The conflict deepens. What if Daniel was Nathaniel, but a Nathaniel who'd turned against the cult, tried to destroy it, and lost his memory in the chaos? Could the man she hated also be the one who saved her? As more memories return, Daniel recalls fragments of fire, screams, and betrayal. He remembers setting the camp ablaze to stop the Fold's leader, Reverend Talbot, from killing more innocents. He'd barely escaped the explosion, burned and half dead with his mind broken. That was 10 years ago. Somehow he rebuilt his life as Daniel Reeves, the rancher who never looked back. But Talbot survived too. And now Clara's arrival means the Fold might be searching again. Act 3. The return of the Fold while Daniel wrestles with guilt and half-formed recollections. 3 riders arrive under the pretense of seeking shelter. Clara freezes when she sees the insignia stitched into their coats. A silver circle with a cross and flame, the mark of the redeemed Fold. They claim to be missionaries lost in the storm, but their eyes are cold and their smiles too sharp. Daniel hides Clara in the cellar, pretending he's alone. The men stay the night, asking questions about travelers, describing a wayward sinner matching Clara's description. One of them recognizes Daniel's scar and leans closer. "You favor a man we used to know. Brother Nathaniel. He left us unfinished work." Daniel feigns ignorance, but his heart thunders. He realizes the Fold still believes Brother Nathaniel betrayed them, and they've come to erase him. As night deepens, tension explodes. Clara sneaks from the cellar, determined not to let him die protecting her. She steals Daniel's rifle and ambushes one of the riders, whispering the same line from their first meeting. "Don't come closer. I'll kill you." Only this time, she means it. Gunfire shatters the calm. Daniel fights alongside her, defending the ranch. The battle is brutal and intimate. Firelight flickering against snow. The old Bible torn open, bullets cracking the window panes. In the chaos, Daniel's memory fully returns. Every sin, every act of cruelty he once committed under the Fold's indoctrination, every soul he hurt before he turned. The guilt nearly paralyzes him, but Clara grabs his face, shouting over the gunfire, "You burned that place to the ground to save us." "Stop running from it," her words anchor him. The man who once enslaved people is gone. The man who stands before her has atoned through 10 years of quiet kindness. Together, they outwit the remaining zealots, leading them into the barn where Daniel ignites the hayloft. A symbolic replay of the past destruction, cleansing with fire once more. The barn burns, the Fold dies screaming in their own zealotry, and dawn rises over a blackened field. Resolution, redemption, and new beginnings. When the storm clears, the ranch is half ruined but still standing. Clara and Daniel bury the bodies together side by side, neither speaking much. She looks at him not as a monster or savior, but as a man who finally faced his truth. Daniel offers her freedom, money, a horse, a way to start again, but she refuses to leave. "You've been 2 men in one life," she says softly. "Maybe it's time you stop hiding from either." He nods, humbled. They rebuild through the spring, slowly. Townsfolk whisper about the fire, the strangers, the truth behind the rancher's past, but Daniel no longer hides. When lawmen come asking, he tells them everything. The Fold's remnants are hunted down, its crimes exposed. The final scene mirrors the first. Snow melting into muddy streams, wind calm. Clara stands by the fence, gazing toward the hills. Daniel joins her. There's no grand confession of love, only the quiet understanding of 2 people who found redemption not through forgetting, but through facing the fire together. As they walk back to the ranch, the camera, or the story's eye, pulls wide to show the land reborn, white snow giving way to green. The rancher's lie has burned away. Only truth remains. The snow had fallen for 3 days straight, burying the Montana frontier beneath silence. The land was white and cold as bone. Every fence post vanished. The world was nothing but drift and wind. Rancher Luke Callahan trudged through it, leading his mare by rein, searching for a lost calf. A widower of 3 years, he carried his loneliness like a second skin, quiet, heavy, constant. Then he saw smoke curling from the ruined cabin in the gulch. That cabin had been abandoned since the Baxter family died of fever the previous spring. Luke rode down thinking to shelter for the night. But as he opened the door, the crack of a rifle split the air. A voice shrieked, wild and trembling, "Don't come closer, I'll kill you." Luke froze, the barrel of his breath visible. Through the half-collapsed window stood a woman, thin, shivering, eyes wide with fear and despair. Her clothes were torn, her cheeks bruised. She was no ghost, though in that stormlight she might have been one. The woman's name, he'd later learn, was Sarah Bennett, a widow half-starved. Her mind fraying at the edges after running from the same bandits who'd killed her husband weeks earlier. But in that first moment, she was simply an animal backed against a wall, willing to die before being touched again. Act 1. The refuge and the stranger. Luke didn't draw his gun. He simply raised his hands and spoke low, the way you might soothe a spooked horse. "I don't mean you harm, ma'am. You're bleeding." She warned him again, but her voice broke mid-threat. When the wind shoved the door open behind him, she flinched so violently she nearly dropped the rifle. He laid his coat on the floor, stepped back out into the snow and said, "I'll leave some wood at the door. You'll freeze elsewise." Then he did just that. Set wood, jerky, and his only flask of whiskey at the threshold before returning to his mare. An hour later, the door creaked open and the supplies were gone. The next morning, Luke returned to find the rifle lowered, the woman watching him through tears. "You're either the kindest man alive," she whispered, "or a fool." That was how the thaw began, not of winter, but of two wounded hearts that didn't yet know they needed each other. Luke stayed nearby, patching the roof, chopping wood, speaking only when spoken to. Sarah kept the gun close, but her voice grew steadier each day. She told fragments of her story. She and her husband Thomas had traveled west with a wagon party seeking land. A gang of drifters posing as traders attacked. They shot Thomas, took the wagon, left her in the snow thinking she'd die. She found this cabin and had been hiding since. When Luke asked why she hadn't gone to town, her eyes darkened. "Because one of those men wore a badge." Act 2. The walls begin to melt. The days passed with slow trust. They patched leaks together, melted snow for water, built a fire that filled the cabin with warmth and uneasy companionship. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, two souls learned to breathe again. Luke never asked about the badge again, but he understood. He too had known betrayal by men meant to uphold the law. Years ago, his wife and infant daughter had died in a wagon raid led by outlaws later hired as town deputies. The system protected them. Luke had buried his family and never forgiven God or man. In the quiet of shared chores, her sewing, his woodcutting, their walls began to soften. Luke noticed Sarah hum while cooking, a sound so fragile it could shatter. She noticed the way his hands trembled when he tried to touch his wedding band still looped on a chain. One night by firelight, she asked, "Why do you stay out here alone?" He replied, "Because every time I go where there's people, I see ghosts." She smiled sadly. "Then maybe you need someone to haunt you different." That night she dreamt of her husband's blood on the snow. He dreamt of his daughter's laughter. They both woke before dawn, eyes meeting across the dying fire. Two people lost in grief's storm, finding a map in each other's gaze. Act 3. The past returns with gunfire, but peace on the frontier never lasts. On the fourth week, hoofbeats broke the stillness. 3 riders appeared in the ravine below the cabin, bandits wearing winter coats with sheriff stars sewn crookedly to their vests. Sarah's face went white. "That's them," she whispered. "The one in the middle, he's the one who killed Thomas." Luke didn't hesitate. He doused the fire, grabbed his rifle, and told her to hide under the floorboards. She refused. "They'll burn the place with us inside if I hide." The riders called out, pretending friendly greetings. Luke answered from the doorway, voice calm. "Ain't no fugitives here, just a man tending stock." But when one of them spotted Sarah's bonnet through the window, the pretense shattered. Bullets tore through the cabin. Luke pushed Sarah to the ground, firing back. Snow blew in through the cracks, carrying smoke and gunpowder. It was chaos. Wood splintering, horses screaming outside, Sarah reloading with shaking hands. For a moment she froze, staring at the gun like it was the same curse that had taken her husband. Luke's shout snapped her back. "If you want to live, fight!" She did. Her shot dropped the first rider clean. The second fell moments later under Luke's fire. The leader, the one with the crooked badge, charged into the cabin, tackling Luke to the floor. They struggled, fists and fury, until Sarah seized the iron poker from the hearth and struck the man down. When it was over, the snow had gone eerily still again. 3 bodies outside, smoke curling through a bullet hole. The cabin stank of blood and smoke, but they were alive. Act 4, the wound and the healing after. Burying the men beneath frozen soil, Sarah collapsed in tears. "I killed him," she whispered. "I thought I'd feel free, but I just feel empty." Luke wrapped her in his arms. "Empty is better than buried," he said gently. "You did what you had to." Days turned into weeks again. The storm finally broke, leaving the world bright and new. They rode to town together, half expecting lawmen to question them, but no one came. The town sheriff had vanished weeks earlier, perhaps one of the men they'd buried. Luke sold some cattle, bought new supplies, and returned to rebuild the cabin beside her. Slowly, spring crept in, icicles melting, grass pushing through thawing ground. Life, stubborn and quiet, returned. Sarah planted a small patch of wildflowers near the graves, not in mourning, but in reclamation. "Something should grow from all that death," she said. Luke watched her, feeling the ache in his chest ease for the first time in years. They didn't speak of love right away. It came softly in gestures, the way she poured him coffee before he asked, the way he built a porch so she could watch sunsets safely. The bond between them was not born of passion but of survival. 2 broken souls building a bridge of trust, plank by plank. Climax, the storm's end. The final test came when a passing marshal rode up months later, asking questions about a missing badge and 3 drifters gone dead. Luke felt the old fear stir, but before he could answer, Sarah stepped forward and told the truth. "They were killers," she said. "We defended ourselves. If there's a price for that, we'll pay it together." The marshal studied them, then tipped his hat. "Self-defense don't need confession," he said, and rode off. When he was gone, Sarah turned to Luke, smiling faintly. "You don't have to protect me anymore." Luke took her hand.
"No, ma'am."
"But I want to." That night they stood on the porch watching the last snow melt into streams that ran like silver threads across the land. Luke finally took off his wedding ring and buried it beneath the new flowers. "Time to let the dead rest," he whispered. Sarah kissed his scarred cheek. "And time for the living to begin." Resolution, hope reborn. The story closes in summer. The once ruined cabin now stands whole, fresh timber, clean windows, a new life. Sarah and Luke work side by side, building fences and tending horses. The land that once buried them in sorrow now blooms with wild grass and freedom. At twilight they sit on the porch as thunder rolls far off, not the threat of storm, but the promise of rain. Sarah leans into him, eyes closed, and whispers, "That day in the snow, I meant it when I said I'd kill you. But I think what I really meant was, I didn't want anyone close enough to hurt me again." Luke smiles. "Then I'm glad you missed." The story ends on laughter carried by the wind, a gentle, human sound against the vast, forgiving sky. The blizzard had been falling for 2 days when Deputy Ethan Cole found the tracks, a single set of boot prints, weaving through the snow like a drunk man's path. But they weren't a man's. They were too small. A woman's footprints, heading toward the abandoned mining shack on the edge of the Red Creek Valley. Ethan was supposed to be hunting a fugitive, Mara Vance, wanted for murdering her husband, Sheriff Henry Vance. The case had divided the town of Dry Hollow. Henry had been a respected man, though feared. Mara had been the quiet wife everyone pitied. When the sheriff's body was found with a knife in his chest, she'd vanished into the storm. The poster said $200 reward, dead or alive. Ethan reached the shack at dusk. The door creaked open on a gust of wind, and there she was, pale, trembling, rifle aimed squarely at his chest. Her voice was raw, shaking but fierce. "Don't come closer, I'll kill you." Ethan froze, his breath misting between them. He recognized her from her wanted sketch, though the real woman looked nothing like a killer. Her eyes were haunted, not cold. Her hands shook not from guilt but from cold and fear. She stood barefoot on the rough floorboards, her husband's coat hanging off her thin frame like a borrowed shell. He slowly raised his hands.
"You know who I am?"
"I know you work for them," she said. "And if you take one more step, I swear you'll die here with me." Act 1, The Fugitive's truth. Ethan didn't move. He could see her collapsing inside, the strength in her words draining as frostbitten fingers gripped the rifle. "You think I killed him," she rasped. "But you don't know what he was." "I'm here to find out," Ethan said quietly. For hours, they stared at each other across the dim cabin. The storm outside howled like something alive. She finally let him set his pistol on the ground and approach the fire. Only then did she lower the rifle, though her eyes never left him. Mara's story came in broken whispers. She hadn't killed her husband in cold blood, she said. She'd run because no one in town would believe the truth, that Henry Vance, the noble sheriff, had been running a smuggling ring, using his badge to cover murder and theft. When she discovered his secret ledger hidden under the church floorboards, he'd found her reading it. There was a fight and the knife. She didn't remember what happened next. When she woke, Henry was dead. Ethan listened, torn. Henry had been his mentor once, the man who'd given him his badge. But Ethan also remembered bruises on Mara's face the few times she came to town. He'd looked away then, convincing himself it wasn't his business. Now the guilt pricked at him like thorns. When he asked where the ledger was, Mara looked to the hearth. "Gone," she said. "I burned it." No one should have that kind of power. But later, when she thought he wasn't looking, Ethan saw her glance at a loose floorboard near her feet. Act 2. The Trap and the Truth As. The storm raged for days. The two were trapped together. Ethan split firewood and cooked beans. Mara sat silent, staring into the flames as if they whispered ghosts. Slowly, the hostility thawed. He saw not a fugitive, but a woman haunted by years of fear. Their conversations grew personal. She asked him why he'd never married. He said the badge took everything it could from a man, time, peace, even trust. "That badge," she said bitterly, "took everything from me too." On the third night, the cabin shook with a sudden blast of wind, followed by distant hoofbeats. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He looked out the window and saw torchlight flickering in the storm. 3 riders, bounty hunters, were cutting through the valley. "They'll kill you for the reward," he said, moving fast. Mara grabbed the rifle again. "And you'll let them?" He shook his head. "No, I'm not letting anyone else die because of him." They doused the fire, covered the tracks, and slipped out through the back. Snow cut at their faces like knives. They huddled in a narrow ravine as the hunters searched nearby, shouting her name. In that tense silence, she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was too tangled. Finally, he said, "Because I think I already failed you once." Act 3. Confession. Under fire at dawn, the hunters found the cabin and set it ablaze, assuming their prey was inside. The firelight turned the sky orange. Ethan and Mara watched from the ridge, their refuge turn to ashes. She trembled, not from cold this time, but from grief. "That was the last place I had left," she said softly. They rode through the storm to an old line shack miles away. There she broke down fully. "You don't understand," she said. "If the town sees me alive, they'll hang me without a word. Henry's men run the law. The only proof I had is under that floorboard, the ledger." Ethan was silent, thinking. If she was right, exposing the truth meant turning on his own brothers in arms. His whole world, his badge, his faith in justice, and would crumble. But when he looked at her, huddled by the fire with tears streaking her face, he knew he couldn't let her die for their sins. He made a decision. At first light, he rode alone back to the burned cabin. In the blackened ruin, he pried up the half-burned floorboard and found it. A tin box, scorched but intact. Inside, the ledger, filled with names, payments, and blood accounts. Henry Vance, the saintly sheriff, had sold justice for gold. When Ethan returned, she was waiting with her rifle raised again. He held up the box. "You were telling the truth," he said. "Everything." Her gun lowered. For the first time, her eyes filled with hope. "Then what now?" she whispered. "Now," he said grimly, "we finish what he started." Act 4. Justice in the Snow. They rode back to Dry Hollow under cover of night. The town was half asleep, the saloon lights dim, the church bell silent under frost. Ethan went straight to the jailhouse and pinned the ledger to the notice board, every page visible for Dawn to see. The names written there were not just bandits. They were town leaders, deputies, even the judge. It was a death sentence for everyone involved. Before sunrise, the town erupted. Men grabbed guns, shouting accusations. Some fled, others tried to burn the ledger. But Ethan was ready. He faced them with his rifle and badge gleaming in the first light. You wanted the truth, he said coldly. Now choke on it. Gunfire cracked through the streets. Mara helped from the shadows, picking off those who aimed for Ethan. When it was over, the courthouse stood half-burned. The corrupt fled or dead, and the snow was red as dawn. But justice came with a price. Ethan was wounded in the fight, a bullet grazing his side. Mara caught him as he fell. Don't die now, she whispered, voice breaking. I've lost enough good men, he smiled weakly. Maybe it's time a bad one lived instead. Resolution, a new beginning. Weeks later, the snows melted. The town rebuilt itself, smaller, quieter, freer. Mara's name was cleared. The new judge, brought from another county, declared Henry's death a tragedy of justice long overdue. Ethan hung his badge for the last time, setting it beside the tin box that had destroyed one sheriff and saved another. He told Mara he was leaving for the northern plains, a rancher's life far from gunfire and guilt. But before he rode out, she stepped close and said softly, Don't you dare leave me alone in this world again. He looked into her eyes, saw no fear left, only courage. Then come with me, he said. They rode away together through a field of melting snow, the land slowly turning green beneath the thaw. In the distance, the ruins of the old jail stood, a reminder of the past burned clean. As the sun rose, she leaned against him and murmured, That first night, when I said I'd kill you. He chuckled softly. You meant it, she smiled. I meant I'd never let another man close enough to break me. But maybe you didn't come to break me. Maybe you came to build what's left. The story ends on that note. The snow, once a symbol of death, now gleaming like new promise.